I'm Laura.
And I'm Brad.
We are here from Decoda to bridge your week. We're going to start with a little free association. So Brad, I'll say a word and you say the first thing that pops into your head. Spring.
Migration. I love spring migration. It's when all the animals move from the warmer climes to the more northern climes. It's one of my favorite times of year. Okay. The music of Philip Glass.
Painful. I play the French horn, and minimalist music can be ouchy for brass players. Creativity.
A way of ordering the world, reflecting your own inner thoughts and feelings.
Okay, that was a long thing. Okay.
Okay, how about a final one? Artist.
Speaker of truth. How about artist to you?
Well, that's a complicated question. I'd say somebody that's using their creativity to express an idea.
So speaking of using creativity, we want to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. So I'll start. My name is Laura Weiner. I play the French horn and I do a lot of different things in my life. And my connection to USC goes back almost 10 years. I was invited here with Professor Bryant, and we both were, of course, to do a workshop at Lee Correctional in Bishopville, and we've come to Columbia several times since then. I also play in Alarm Will Sound with Professor Harley, so we have a lot of connections here at USC. What about you, Brad?
Well, I am a bassoon player and a composer, and my relationship with Columbia goes back that far and further. I've come here a number of times with the Chamber Music Collective Decoda to do some creative projects in the community, whether that was at the Kershaw County Arts Center or at Lee Correctional or a couple of other things as well. We love coming here. It's one of our favorite places to be. The community is all, I would say, very creative, very musical, and it's a joy to be here. Laura, let's get into a little bit more about your journey as an artist, because it's true what you say. You do a lot of different things, and I'm curious how a horn player ends up in the world of social justice, in the world of law, in the world of rock climbing. Can you kind of trace this path for us?
Yeah, I'm glad that this series is called kind of Bridging Your Week, because I think there are so many times when I didn't realize I was building a bridge to this kind of new venture that changed my life while I was doing it. And it's kind of like only when you're across the bridge do you realize kind of that you've built this bridge. So I do a lot of things in my life that I did not expect to be doing when I was in music school. So I studied French horn performance, and for many years I am a freelancer in New York City. So I did a lot of chamber music, a lot of Broadway shows, contemporary music, and occasionally some orchestral playing, like a lot of brass players do. But I also got really interested in teaching artist work. So I have worked a lot with elementary school students, high school students, and incarcerated students. So here in South Carolina at Lee Correctional, as we've mentioned, and then in New York State at Sing Sing Correctional Facility.
Now, Laura, when you say teaching artist, can you define what that term means to you?
What it means to me? Yeah, I can't really define it in words, but I can define it in a gesture, which is this kind of like symbiotic two halves of my life, I think maybe of your life, perhaps even of some of your lives, where you could not be the performer you are without being the teacher you are. You couldn't be the teacher you are without being the performer you are. So when I'm a teaching artist, what that means is I learn a lot from my students of all kind of different backgrounds and experiences. And I use my performing skills, my performing experience to kind of inform my teaching work. Brad, bridging your week. So let's go back, I don't know, 10 years ago. What kind of bridges did you not realize you were building 10 years ago as a musician?
Well, like you, I studied music as an undergrad, but my focus in my undergrad was on composition. And I think I kind of had the attitude that as a bassoon player, the highest thing I could aspire to do was to be in an orchestra. But in the meantime, there were a lot of other things that I wanted to keep learning about. And I thought, I've got time. I will learn about the basics of how music works and composition and music history. And then after my undergrad, I'll really focus in on bassoon. And I was practicing a lot of bassoon during my undergrad, and I did go to grad school specifically for bassoon. And as the time went on, since I've left school, I've become really grateful that I took the time to kind of think deeply about the music that I loved and how it was put together, because I use all of those things in a day-to-day basis. I do a lot of orchestra playing right now, but I'm not a full-time member of any major symphony orchestra. I would say that I kind of equally divide my time between bassoon playing, chamber music, orchestra, that kind of thing, teaching artist work, like you were talking about, in incarceration facilities, in schools, in homeless shelters, things like that, and composition, which occupies a huge part of my kind of mental processes through the day, through the week, through my life, even though that's not the primary source of my artistic income. And I like it that way because it gives me a lot of freedom in the projects that I take and what I want to do creatively. And my interests are very diverse. I love making beats in software like Ableton Live and things like that, and connecting that to the social justice work that I do. I love going to the park and looking for animals and taking videos of those animals and working hard on editing them into these kind of beautiful little mini visual poems. And that I don't think is different from being an artist in a lot of ways. And I look for ways to kind of bring those worlds together as much as I can. It's all one motion, and I hope that at the end of my life, when I look back, I'll say, all of this was one motion. It was an expression of the artistic impulses that I had inside. And some of them were best expressed on bassoon, but a lot of them were not, even though that's what I studied so much when I was in school.
So I have a question about what it takes courage-wise to do everything that you do. So I think all of us can identify with the kind of courage it takes to go out on stage when you're nervous and perform in front of other people. And it takes courage, those of you who have done a lot of teaching, it takes courage to be a teacher, I think, to be kind of vulnerable in front of your students. What about the kind of courage it takes to be a composer? Do you see those as kind of related, or do you think that's like a slightly different courage muscle?
I think you're right that any kind of artistic endeavor puts us in a vulnerable position. I think what takes the most courage is letting go of everything else and allowing yourself to focus on one thing, to do it well, even if you know that next week your focus is going to swing back to the other thing. So I personally go through weeks, months, sometimes it seems like even years, where my focus is more on composition, or more on bassoon, or more on teaching artist work, and sometimes even more on go outside and take some pictures of animals, because that's a really important part of my life as well. So to allow yourself to say, if I need to take a little bit of time to do this project and I'm not doing 3 hours of scales every day, it doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't mean I'm never going to get back into shape. You give yourself space to do what you feel you need to do at the highest level possible. Altogether, these solo pieces make a kind of slow motion chorale, so the listeners are walking through the forest, getting a sense of the chorale, but also these individual solo pieces coming in and out of focus. So the wonderful bassoonists of the University of South Carolina are playing this, along with some recent grads and other members of the bassoon community in the area, April 10th at 3 p.m. at Congaree National Park, just down the road, one of the most beautiful places on earth. it's going to be a beautiful event. Everybody's playing the music beautifully, and I'd highly recommend it, both as a way to hear some music, but also just to get outside into one of the treasures of this area.
Last thing, Brad, you have the fantastic USC community as a rapt audience. What advice would you give to current music students?
If you can find a way to make your career something that you're excited about getting up to do every day, that's really the ideal. And I know that's not a groundbreaking thing to say, but we all have passions, and for all of us, music is one of them. But we have a lot of passions and interests. And I just really believe that there's always a way to bring those interests closer and closer together. And the more we do that, the more fulfilling our careers are going to be. So whatever that is for you, think, is there room for music in that thing? Or is there room for that thing in my music making? And now I turn it to you, Laura. What advice would you give to these brilliant young musicians?
I feel like I want to kind of echo and emphasize some of what you say, and kind of also be honest and say that almost every musician doesn't really know what they want to do fully. I mean, I don't know what I want to do fully, but I always think of this Rilke quote, which is to live your way into the answer. And I think that's something that I try and practice in my own life, and I encourage my students to practice, is it's okay not to know. Live your way into the answer. So don't worry too much about the questions at this moment.
Laura and I perform together a lot. We are frequently chamber music partners, and we are life partners as well. And this week we performed a brand new duet for horn and bassoon that's based on the song of a bird called the oyster catcher. Here's a little bit of that piece.
So Brad, you mentioned bringing interests kind of closer together always in your creative life. Can you give an example of what you mean?
Sure. I mentioned I love to take videos of animals, especially birds, and sometimes I'll get a video of a bird singing, and I like to shoot in slow motion so it looks like it's singing very slowly. And one of my favorite pastimes is to replace the bird song with bassoons playing a chorale or playing something that lines up with the bird's beak moving, so that it's almost like this fantasy world where the birds we're hearing are singing this beautiful chorale-like bassoon music. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we all look forward to the next episode of Bridging Your Week.
Thank you.